but before I can rest my head down on that pillow, I need to get something straight about the Waller family, a Duggar adjacent family even more strongly rooted in the IBLP. In my last video, I discussed Bill Gothard and the IBLP. During my research on those topics, I couldn't help but repeatedly run into the names of Bill Gates, Jim Bob Duggar, of course, but also David Waller and his beautiful wife, Priscilla. If you're not aware, Priscilla Waller was formerly known as Priscilla Keller, and she is Anna Duggar's sister. David married Priscilla a couple years after Josh married Anna. David and Priscilla have an interesting YouTube channel and a blog called David Loves Priscilla. If you check out these web pages, you will be treated to many interesting videos, just like this one.
Well, howdy. Here we are in the Buford Grove Baptist Church, and there's a lot of memories running wild right now.
That's right.
Yes.
This is the place where, right there's the place where I first gave my wife a kiss on that wedding day, and it's kind of a similar experience for you guys. Different day.
Yes, quite a few years
Several years
later.
later.
Yes.
We showed them how to do it. They liked it so much that they thought they would try it.
Well, we're so grateful for the Buford Grove family who have just really blessed us time and again. It's fun to return. Josh and Anna, you haven't been back since when?
We haven't been back since your wedding. That was the last time we were here. So it's fun to get to stop off tonight and to get to visit. And
They're so sweet. The people here are so sweet, and we're so grateful for all their love and decorating the church and cooking the food for us and being so gracious. So if you ever are driving by Florida or
Northeast Florida, near Jacksonville, you can come by and join them. And it's great, Buford Grove Baptist Church. And we are looking forward to having a great Thanksgiving. Hope you're spending time with your family as well. God bless you, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
All right.
And don't forget to kiss.
I have to be honest. After spending some time on David and Priscilla's YouTube page, my main feeling was, at least Priscilla isn't married to Josh Duggar. That's literally the majority of what I thought about that page, other than being kind of impressed at how many trips David and Priscilla go on. Mexico, Israel, Africa, the Caribbean, they are traveling a lot and often taking their kids with them. That seems nice, I guess. But I do wonder how and why Anna was chosen for Josh instead of Priscilla. It turns out Priscilla is actually older than Anna, which I never would have guessed from their videos, where Anna seems to act like the older, more mature sister. Clearly, Priscilla wins in the baby voice category. So, I was thinking it's interesting that Priscilla remained unwed while Anna courted and married Josh. But it's a can of worms I can't really find a can opener for yet, so I'll stick it back on the shelf and let it get moldy for a while. So the point of all of this is that Priscilla remained unmarried until David Waller came along. David William Waller is the son of Brian and Sue Waller. He has a ton of siblings and seems to fall somewhere in the middle of the birth order. David's parents ended up pulling their eldest two children out of kindergarten because they disapproved of some of the things they were learning from other children. So by the time David was old enough to begin school, the family was a homeschooling family. They called their homeschool Gloria Day Academy. Reportedly, David became a Christian at 3 years old, but still suffered with sin as he grew older. At 12 years old, he attended a basic seminar in the IBLP where he recommitted his life to Christ. I have to laugh a little bit because I feel it's over the top to believe at 12 you can make these kinds of decisions and that he had so much sin going on in his life, but who knows? It's been reported that David was a creative child who was good at coming up with new inventions of homemade toys. He also bred mice as a child, which I find terrifying. I don't like the idea of lots of little mice in a small box together where they all scamper over each other. I think that's really gross. One interesting and good thing that I read was David grew up doing many chores around the house, and his family did not stick to traditional gender roles when it came to assigning chores. So he learned to do tasks like laundry and cooking that many of his male peers did not learn growing up. His parents also worked to instill a passion for helping others, so David often volunteered in nursing homes as a teenager. Seemingly, there were a lot of good things going on in the Waller family. David moved many times as a child. He considered Chicago his hometown after living there for 9 years. But while living in Maryland, he learned how to take care of horses and grow tomatoes. He was fascinated by science and biology and began studying nutrition, chemistry, and biology at 14 years old. David began volunteering with children at 15. He worked in the public schools and taught weekly Bible clubs and community centers. He also traveled to Australia on a mission trip with his brother Adam and on a mission trip to Mexico with his parents. Here is a picture of David with his horse. So I'm hearing a lot of good things. I'm also hearing and seeing that the Waller family seem to be very financially stable and have access to money and opportunities for their kids we often don't see with many other families in the IBLP. It's also here that I want to mention many fans and snarkers speculate that David might be gay. I guess it's a possibility with any of the men in this community that they would feel a lot of pressure to cover up any homosexual tendencies and still get married and have a family with a woman. But I did want to say there doesn't seem to be any evidence that David is gay. And I personally don't feel that if a man acts effeminately, that automatically means he's homosexual. My experience has been that guys who don't always follow perfect gender norms can still be straight. On the flip side, a man who is very macho can identify as gay. I sometimes speculate on whether or not public figures are gay because I read a lot about it in blind items. See my video about Cody Brown. But I just really don't see any evidence in David's case, and it's not a big feeling I get about him. On a side note, it doesn't matter to me one way or another, and I understand it can be annoying or hurtful to have people speculate about it. I'm just reporting that it is an issue that's brought up a lot when discussing David. Career-wise, in June 23, 2005, David left with his family to pursue a 2-year mission in Mongolia. While in Mongolia, David taught English lessons for business, schools, government officials, and other organizations. His brother Isaac unexpectedly passed away of a rare form of cancer early on this trip. This spurred David to work harder to win others to the Lord. This is really sad, and I do wonder about the medical care that Isaac received. I may do another video on that later. David began working for the Institute in Basic Life Principles, the IBLP, in 2007 after returning from Mongolia. He worked organizing conferences, planning schedules, and working on staff logistics. For many years, he worked as the administrative director of the Advanced Training Institute. That is a training institute that is part of the IBLP. However, about a year ago, he left that position, likely jumping off a burning ship, and took a position as a pastor in Texas. David first met Priscilla Keller in March of 2008 while she was on a journey to the heart where David was working. He did not feel ready to pursue a relationship at that time. He started thinking about Priscilla more and more over the next few years. In 2010, David talked to her family about his attraction for Priscilla. In July of 2011, he talked more about his short-term goals and his desire to pursue the relationship. After getting his number from Josh Duggar, David called Priscilla's father, Mike Keller, and asked for permission to court Priscilla in September of 2011. Mr. Keller asked him to memorize Romans 10, Isaiah 25, and Luke 15 before he could begin this relationship. And then he was given full permission to begin their courtship in September. On November 10th, 2011, so just 2 months later, David asked Priscilla to enter the official courtship at her parents' home in Florida. After reading scriptures together, David asked Priscilla to marry him on November 16th, 2011, saying, "Would you join me in following Christ to be my wife, best friend, and faithful prayer warrior, to live together, travel together, serve together, and if need be, die for the cause of Christ? Will you marry me?" Her reply was, "I would be honored." David married Priscilla Keller on February 4th, 2012 at Buford Grove Baptist Church in Hilliard, Florida. This wedding was featured on an episode of the TLC show 19 Kids and Counting. The crazy thing about all of this for me is the fact that with this wedding, a second Keller child would be marrying into Fundy royalty. Bill Gothard literally officiated David Waller's wedding. He didn't even do that for the Duggars. Priscilla's family, the Kellers, were very different from the Wallers in so many ways. Check out my video on Anna Duggar to get more in-depth information. But Priscilla's dad ended up working in prison ministry, and the family literally had no money. They lived in a double-wide trailer. They were homeschooled, but they didn't seem to have half of the opportunities or resources of the Wallers. Priscilla Lynn Keller was born on July 3, 1986, to parents Mike and Suzette Keller. The Kellers raised their children with strict rules. When she was 10 years old, Priscilla felt convicted of her sin and prayed with her dad for salvation. In 1996, her father made the decision to quit his job and begin working in full-time ministry at a local juvenile detention center. Priscilla often accompanied her father on these trips and led Bible studies for incarcerated young women. Along with her siblings, Priscilla was homeschooled and completed high school at the age of 16. In September of 2007, Priscilla attended Journey to the Heart with her sister Anna, and she felt inspired to work for Journey to the Heart after that. She spent the next 3 years leading journeys, as well as ministering in Romania, Mexico, Singapore, Malaysia, and Peru. She also began working for the IBLP at their headquarters in Chicago, which is where she met her future husband, David Waller. I find it super interesting that at least she left home for a period of time and kind of worked outside of the home at the IBLP and ATI headquarters. I also wonder what she witnessed there with Bill Gothard. On September 12, 2011, Priscilla discussed her desire to enter into a courtship with David Waller with her father, who had recently received a phone call from David, and they went forward with their courtship. All right, so then the Wallers were finally living the dream. David was working at ATI, the training institute that is part of the IBLP. They moved to Texas and started having children. At this point, their YouTube channel becomes mainly about announcing more and more pregnancies. I think they are up to 7 children by now. They also highlight trips to Washington, D.C. to visit Anna and Josh when he was working there. Lots of David's videos feature Anna and Priscilla talking about their testimony in their faith. I guess David is sort of using his YouTube channel and blog as a ministry. It's interesting that only a few videos are actually of David himself speaking, and they have significantly fewer views than videos where Priscilla is featured, and especially videos that Anna is in. Clearly, Anna and Priscilla help draw people in for David. Maybe the Duggar connection is still a big draw when choosing a mate? So, there haven't been too many scandals about the Wallers yet, except for the fact that David is the one that had to send out a letter informing everyone in the IBLP that Bill Gothard was stepping down due to allegations of SA and SM. At this time, David was still the director of ATI. Many of Bill Gothard's accusers claim that the staff at IBLP and ATI also acted inappropriately and turned a blind eye when it was obvious Bill Gothard was being slimy. David Waller is never specifically named in the lawsuit, but you do have to wonder what he saw and how he reacted to it. As I stated before, it seems like he intelligently jumped ship just as the IBLP's dumpster fire reached its peak temperature. Good for you, David. But maybe not, because the one thing I can really hold against David is the way he most recently was photographed carrying huge boxes of paperwork for Josh Duggar on his way to trial. This really irked me. I tell myself maybe he was there for Anna, and I guess that's something I can respect. I certainly hope he wasn't there to push Josh and his attorneys to not turn on the IBLP. I also hope he wasn't there in support of Josh. Josh needs to know that everyone around him doesn't accept his shitty, terrible, unredeemable behaviors. Shortly after Josh's trial, David and Priscilla traveled to a resort in Mexico to celebrate their 10-year anniversary. I hope they also took a moment to toast to the fact that Priscilla's sister would finally be free of Josh's presence for at least a few years. So, this is the bones of my research into the Wallers. Just a bunch of facts that have led me down the road to some suppositions. For example, I'm really interested in understanding more about how the Kellers managed to get 2 young daughters into the houses of IBLP royalty. What do these sisters have going for them that the rest of us aren't aware of? Like, why would Anna and Priscilla be chosen out of so many young IBLP girls who are probably just as interested in escaping their lower income households and moving into a Duggar-owned property? I find this really interesting, and it's something I'm still going down a rabbit hole with. I'm also wondering what kind of an income David made working at ATI. How aware was he of what was going on with Bill Gothard? I feel like though I don't have any evidence of David being inappropriate, he must have seen some of the issues with Gothard at some point. The overall general response to the Wallers in Duggar fan groups and Fundy Snark communities is that they are creepy. David's impeccable grooming and wide smile rub many people the wrong way. Priscilla's voice and the way she talks often leads onlookers to comment that she sounds like a Stepford wife, or even like she might have some kind of brain injury. My next video will be a follow-up to Keeping Up with the Wallers, and it will address some of these thoughts about Priscilla. It will look at how the IBLP's concept of unchangeables can affect a young child, and how homeschooling feeds into many issues we see with the adults in the IBLP community now. When I first started looking into the Wallers, I expected to find out more annoying issues that would really bother me about them. I've commented before on this channel that from afar, I've sort of thought of the Waller boys as like Children of the Corn kids or Village of the Damned kids, all extremely white with blondish, reddish tinged hair, and generally they appear like a person from a time long gone with their perfect little pressed suits and weirdly large smiles. But following this deep dive, I'm finding David Waller significantly less creepy than Josh Duggar and some other men I've been looking at in the Fundy world. Maybe he's more kind of like a big nerd who's been fully indoctrinated into the faith and is doing everything he can to appear perfect and happy at all times. I'm kind of taken aback to learn that Priscilla spent a couple of years kind of working for the IBLP out on her own in an office administrative-like setting. I'm happy for her because that means she had a chance, at least an opportunity, to see the world around her. In one of her videos on their YouTube channel, Priscilla actually talks about going on a run around a lake near the IBLP headquarters for exercise daily. And I was kind of like, what? A woman running? Was that even allowed? It made me feel like Priscilla at least had a chance to learn and grow a bit before marrying, even if it was very limited. Lastly, I'm going to share one defining story people always talk about when it comes to the Wallers. I think it's a whole lot of nothing, but Fundy followers often call Priscilla and David the pecan thieves, and here is why. Here is the article posted by David Waller on December 4th, 2012 in Family Updates on his ministry page. He named it The Pecan Story. We were on our way down after completing a wonderful time at the National Bible Bee. God seemed to ordain every step we took. We were dropping off a coworker and would pick them up again on the way back up north. It was on our way and not an inconvenience at all, and to make matters even better, they offered to feed us lunch. No lunch meat for lunch today. We were having a southern meal of homemade fried chicken, so tender and juicy. Yum. This house was surrounded by beautiful fields of peach orchards, pecan groves, and peanut farms. Totally foreign to me, they explained that they had just gathered the pecan harvest by shaking each tree and then raking them into windrows to be picked up by a machine. As our lunch and fellowship came to a close, I asked if there was a good place to go for a little walk before completing the remaining 6-hour drive to Florida. The family kindly offered. We sometimes walk down the highway, but there are no shoulders. You can certainly walk around our yard. We know our neighbor, and he lets us in his pecan grove. As we went outside, the prospect of a walk did not look so inviting, so we headed to the van, bid our host goodbye, and took off. As we pulled out, the clouds parted and the sun beamed down. I quickly looked at Priscilla, and after rounding the bend, decided to pull onto the other side of the neatly planted, mature pecan tree grove. After walking along the road, I felt it was important for us to head back. back. As we headed back, I saw a few pecans pressed into the mud. I dug one out, brushed it off, and cracked it open, only to find the most delicious, lush, buttery pecan I think I have ever tasted. I handed some to Priscilla. I had a little caution about it before doing it, but I quickly brushed it aside. We thought maybe we should dig out just a few and bring them down for Thanksgiving. That would be a nice treat. After all, they were already harvested this field. It all started so innocently, so they're just gleaning the field. I ran to the van and found our paper Bible Bee gift bag. After only a few minutes, the bag was filling nicely. I glanced up and waved as a blue car drove by. I am not sure it registered in my mind that it was a state trooper until I saw his car return only a few minutes later. This time he rolled down his window and called out, "Hey, what are you all doing out there? Who gave you the permission to be out here?" Motioning towards the red house in the distance, I explained we were traveling through the area and just had lunch with that family over there, and they said we could go out for a walk here. The trooper asked, "Do they own the property?" I replied, "No, but they said they know the owner and he lets them walk in this grove." The trooper replied, "Well, I just talked to the owner, and he told me he does not want anyone out here. You wait right here. He wants to have a word with you." Oh boy, was I in for a surprise. A pickup pulled up in a short while later, and out jumped a plain-clothes officer. He walked over to talk with the other officer while we waited another 15 minutes. Finally, the owner of the property pulled up. As he got out of his pickup truck, he grabbed a slender, fiberglass cattle prod. As he walked briskly towards us, he slashed at the grass back and forth as he walked. He was angry. For what seemed like an eternity, he yelled questions at us such as, "What did you think you were doing? Who gave you permission to be out here? It's one thing for me to be chasing people off during the night, but what gave you the nerve to be out here stealing in broad daylight? I bet you got a Bible in your car back there, don't you? Don't you realize that it's like stealing money out of my wallet?" Obviously, this was not the first time people had wronged him. Of course, we felt horrible and wanted to do anything needed to make this right. After the landowner had carried on for a time, he turned back and called out to the officers, "You got your deputy on his way out here yet? You better, because they're going to hear gunshots over their heads in a minute." After a stern warning from the officers, a few more police came on the scene. Each one seemed to do their best to calm down the landowner by giving us a stern talking to. Finally, the deputy for the area arrived. God so ordained him to be a rather large, jolly officer. Upon getting my license, he went over to get my wife's. When we had heard the threat of gunfire, I asked if she could be permitted to sit in the van. When he went up to get her information, his first question was, "How many months are you along?" She burst into tears and held up 5 fingers. He compassionately said, "You don't have to get all emotional about it. I think we were just going to write you up a warning and not go on his property again." She responded, "Yes, sir." One of the other tall officers ended up doing the negotiations. He had to give me a quote-unquote talking to, loud enough that the landowner could hear to try and appease his wrath. Finally, he asked me what I had to say. I explained that I just wanted to take my wife on a little walk and that I was totally wrong to take the pecans. I told him, "I am a born-again Christian, and no Christian should ever steal. God and I have a good relationship, and I had a caution in my spirit not to do that, and I did not listen to God's prompting. I am really sorry, and I would like to offer this guy restitution. I have no clue what the bag of pecans is worth, but I have $100 in cash right here to give him." With that, the officer told me to come over to talk. The owner was still upset, but had calmed down some. The officer asked him, "Did you take any time to even listen to these kids and what they had to say?" He glared at the ground and shook his head. "Tell him what you told me," the officer stated. I looked the man square in the face. "Sir, I'm a born-again Christian." And he goes on and says the same spiel over again. "I disobeyed God's prompting. I want you to know that I am very sorry. Here is a token of my apology." I stuffed the $100 bills in the top of the bag and began to back away. The officer repeated it. "Did you hear that? He violated his inner peace and did what was wrong, and now is offering you $100 as restitution." He straightened up and looked at me and then at the officer. He said, "No, you keep your money. I don't want your money." After a pause, he looked back up and said, "No, all I want is one good picture of you and your missus holding that bag of pecans." I said, "Yes, sir, anything you want. I have done you wrong." After he took a picture on his little flip phone, I said, "Sir, could you take a picture of us as well? I want to teach my little boy this lesson too." We shook hands and the officer gave us our paperwork and off we went. Wow, what a lesson. Someone once said, "There is no sin known to man that the human mind cannot rationalize away." I had so many ways to rationalize this at the moment, such as, we were gleaning the waste from the harvest. Our friends know the owners. The pecans are going to waste just sitting in the mud. In blueberry fields of Florida, we have friends who let us glean hundreds of pounds of blueberries. However, it is never worth it to rationalize wrongdoing. As we drove down the road, I asked God, "Father, why did you allow this to happen?" The answer came just 2 days later when we went to the prison and shared this story. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and many of the ladies there were really missing their families. This story really hit home because some of the recent situations that the ladies had encountered, we encouraged them to always listen to the prompting of God's Spirit. That's the end of the story. People make a big deal about this on some of the web pages. They think it's kind of funny. And David uses the story as a lesson for others that they need to listen to their heart and what God is telling them to do. I wouldn't really call this a scandal at all, but David and Priscilla will forever be known as the pecan thieves. Thank you for checking out this video. I'm hoping to get my next video out about Priscilla in the next 2 days. As always, I love to hear what you have to say about my videos, so leave me a comment below about what I got right or wrong in this video.